What's up, troop? In today's video, we are going to look at the rhythm factors that work into drum and bass. This is going to be a basic dive into it. So if you're here for advanced polyrhythms and pattern switches and tempo changes into various different patterns, this isn't the video for you. But what I do want to give you is a fundamental understanding of the different rhythms you will find in the genre and show you how you can mix, match, juggle them about and find those common factors that you've heard and want to emulate. And once you understand how they work, well, they're very simple to take and manipulate yourself. I do want to share a very simple bass trick that gives you a really great flowing juxtaposed position once you've got those break rhythms in place. So without any further ado, let's dive into it. Let's start really simple. When you are writing drum and bass rhythm wise, 99.99% of the time, we're going to be in what's called a 4/4. And 4/4 is 4 on the floor pattern. We've got 4 beats to a bar. Really simply laid out, if you do your kick drum, it would be like this. And that's at our 174 BPM, which is like the fundamental middle ground really for DnB. You'll find every beat here has a kick on it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And in your DAW, they should be named as such. So we've got bar 1, beat 1, bar 1, beat 2, bar 1, beat 3, bar 1, beat 4, look. Then the way the grid is separated, and that's these other lines in here, denotes basically the rhythm type or quantized type that we have. So in this instance, that we can fit another 3 notes in before we then get to our 1, 2. And this will be known as sixteenths because all the way across we've got 4, 8, 12, 16. And you'll see in like your quantized time, for example, we've got 1/16 note. Now as a general rule, you're going to call this 1 and this one in the middle here the and. So we'd have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And in drum and bass, we generally aren't going to have a 4 on the floor kick pattern. Not unheard of, but as a general rule, it's not going to be there. And instead we'll take 2 of these away and end up with something like maybe that, where it's happening on the 1 and the 3. And what we'd maybe do is take our snare, which we've got here as the blue, and we'll put that on the 2 and the 4. It sounds a little bit rigid and weird, right? So the really common pattern that we then see is something called syncopation, and that's taking this beat here and bringing it off from the 3 and putting it on the and. So we have quite a large gap here now, and that gives us that rhythm in DnB that we've heard a million times. That syncopated beat between the 2 things. Now the simple thing to tie those together is putting a hi-hat on the and. We can see that we go kick and hat to snare and hat space with our syncopation, kick and hat together, snare back to the hat. We can make that feel a lot faster by having the hat on the beat as well. So you can put the 2 concepts together and get like an ebb and flow, push and pull just by doubling up the hi-hats and keeping that same rhythm. Now there's other really common rhythms that you'll find in DnB that involve the kick and snare patterns being significantly different. And we'll find things like where we only have a single kick that hits on the 1, and instead we'll maybe have the snare double roll in like this, or potentially we'll have the snare hit twice on the and you'll hear this a whole bunch as well. And then the like pressure of this can really be lifted up by putting another kick in, say here, and you end up with. Or we can use that original one where we sit on the 1 and the 3. If we utilize the faster hi-hat pattern in with this as well, you'll hear this a lot. Or even something like this. that slowed down, almost half-time vibe. If we then take the ands out of the hi-hats, we've almost got half-time hip-hop vibe. We can bring a kick drum back in and speed it back up. If we utilise the fast hi-hats again, so we can juggle and play around with those different positionings and rhythms really consistently to get all kinds of different vibes that exist within DnB. Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They let me get my music out to all of the major distributors, and they do that at a price an independent artist can easily afford. If you're ready to get your music or beats out there and want to release an unlimited amount of music each year, check the link in the description below for a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution with DistroKid. But there's a whole world of other sound that also comes out from different parts of the rhythm as well. And that comes down to the quantization and swing. Before, when we looked at it, we were working in sixteenths, and we've got our quantized time down here set to sixteenths. If we take all of the notes that we've got here, and in sixteenths we start applying swing, well look, absolutely nothing happens, because we're sat on the sixteenths, and swing applies to the notes in between that rhythm, right? So if we were to start putting hi-hats in between here and here, for example, which are now in red, and we do swing, you can see that those start getting some movement. 0% swing brings them all the way back, 100% swing brings them all the way into the next note. 50 is going to be where they originally were. So if we go to something like 55, we're going to be just a little bit off rhythm. Working in sixteenths at 174 BPM leads to some pretty trippy and too fast to work with sounds. So what we often end up doing is working in the 1/8 or eighths, even though our rhythm's going to be in sixteenths. So we switch our quantize now over to eighth notes. If we select everything now, when we swing it, now we can see we're swinging all of our ands that we had before. And now applying a bit of swing to these makes a huge difference to the overall feel. And we get that really swung DnB vibe. And we can take it way too far. Or pull it too far forward. That kind of hearty, steppy vibe. Now, when we were looking at, say, patterns that have a double snare, for example, this goes and affects those snares pretty dramatically, right? One, they can't leave that grid, and the ones that are can get moved way off of it, like this. So what we'll often find is a combination of the two. So we'll maybe take our main kind of rhythm here and have that in 1/8 and give that a little bit of swing just to move it slightly off the grid to give it a feel. Everything's just the tiniest bit off time. Then maybe we'll end up with, say, a shaker sound. So here we've just put a really rapid shaker sound in at 16ths. We've swung the actual beat and we can see here like these ands moving just a little bit off. So they're slightly offbeat, but they're done to 1/8. We'd take the shaker separately and we would do that to say 1/16 instead. And we're going to be then shaking the notes in between effectively, causing a different kind of rhythm. So then we end up with something like this. Makes a huge difference, right? Rather than it just being right on grid. And this is before we've taken any account of things like velocity. This is just everything straight playing the same. When we start bringing velocity into it, it gets even better than what we can do and how we can make it ebb and flow. Now, I just want to show you a very simple bass example of where we can make use of triplet at a much slower tempo. And my track High Volume made use of this. The entire track is built off exactly this principle. So we're going to add this bass in here as well. And we can see it's just 3 notes, but what's important is the note length. Look, it goes across all 4 of our segments across the 16. But then by leaving 2 gap, then doing it again and again, we get a triplet flow at a much slower BPM. And because we've done things like our syncopated kick and where our snare lands, we get bass with the kick, snare goes free, bass with just percussion, kick goes free, bass lands with the snare. It's a juxtaposing rhythm that works across the entirety of the track. And once you've heard this here and you understand how it works, you will hear this 1,000,000,001 times across DnB. And it is the easiest thing to then just slightly alter that to create a completely new feeling and reset into the next bit. Now, all this talk of rhythm, I think it's important to note something about this bass sound as well. The reason it works is because the bass sound, even though it's on triplets, is also working in the rhythm of the track. What do I mean? Let's open up Thorn here, and there's a key thing controlling Thorn. The cutoff that I've got here that makes this sound really what it is being controlled by an LFO. If I go over into the mod matrix here, we've got LFO2 here controlling filter 1 cutoff. And LFO2 over here is synced to 1/4, so half of our 1/8. And that means it's oscillating 1 time for every 1 of these instances, because this is exactly 1/4 of a bar. So it's oscillating the LFO 1 time exactly over that period. Let's say we put the speed of the LFO here to 1/8. It's going to sound like it doesn't fit anymore. Now sounds horrendous, doesn't it? And that's because even the sound of the bass is being synced into the rhythm of everything else it's working with. Well, thank you very much for watching. I really hope that was a helpful video for you. If it was, you will find hundreds more on the channel right here that you can watch next. I look forward to seeing you in future videos, and if you have any questions, please leave it in a comment down below. Take care.